So thank you everyone for coming today. We're very excited. We don't often get to do professional development with LBS and ES staff. So thank you for coming. At the end of this, you will get a recorded version, as I stated earlier. You will also get all of the materials, the PowerPoint presentation we do today, as well as the manual, because there's a manual that does come with this that gives you some really great tips and pointers. So with that, we ask if you have any questions, put them in the chat. At the end of each of our sections, we'll kind of open it up for questions, and I'll be monitoring the chat to make sure that if there are any questions, they do get answered. So, if it pops into your mind, just put it in the chat there. Preeti, could you start the presentation, please? So the first thing I want to do is this came out of a consultation last year that we did with Employment Ontario service providers. One of our service providers was talking about, remember last year, there was a lot of virtual recruitment. There were a lot of people who were kind of getting lost between the cracks as virtual recruitment happened. And what kind of came out of all of our discussions last year was maybe there's an opportunity here to kind of do some professional development, look at what's going on, and help people move forward. Next screen, Preeti. So what we did was we thought, well, what were the actual virtual recruitment steps? So from the moment you find a job posting through to the interview, what does that look like? And we thought about, well, what were some of the issues that people were having? So the lack of skills to engage with technology, we're not even going to, and the lack of access to technology, both are very, very helpful. We find the lack of access to technology. A lot of the Employment Ontario service providers were trying to get people in when they could. So Employment Ontario really did work hard to try and make sure people had access. I know also some organizations could offer Chromebooks and things like that. But still, if people didn't know how to engage with technology, that was a really big issue. And the lack of skills to understand what's being asked at different stages. I think we were all there last in some respect, where what exactly am I supposed to do at a virtual job fair? What am I supposed to do? How is this different? But for people who have lower literacy skills or lower basic skills, this was even challenging. Next slide, Preeti. So with that in mind, we reached out to Project READ and Peel-Halton-Dufferin Adult Literacy Network to say, hey, is there some way we could look at the Skills for Success, which is the updated version of Essential Skills, and determine what skills you use for each recruitment step? Like, could we do this and come up with something where literacy and basic skills understands and employment services understands, and we can create better connections? So what levels are needed? How does that skill transfer to that recruitment step? Thinking about that piece. And like we said, today's our opportunity to provide it all to you so that you can see it and you can start to think about where there's opportunities for referrals or where there's opportunities for new programming or whatever it is that we need to help clients and learners more effectively. Our whole goal is to strengthen that job seeker skill so that they don't return 3 months later because something along the way went wrong. They stay employed and that they can move between employment opportunities because they have skills now to undertake that virtual recruitment at another point in their life. I think that's my last slide. So with that in mind, I'm going to turn it over to James. So for this section, if you have any questions for James, pop them in the chat.
Good morning, everybody. I'm Jane with Project READ, by the way, and I have worked with the essential skills since the early 2000s when they first came out. So this whole new skills for success was an interesting idea because when we first talked about profiles, I was thinking, oh yeah, the essential skills profiles. And then it was like, no, the new skills for success profiles. So we are on the cutting edge here because nobody has done a skills profile before this with the new skills for success. So You guys are getting something totally different. Okay, so let's just go through them briefly here. We've got the new skills for success. The first one is reading. Same as before, writing, numeracy, digital, problem solving, communication, collaboration, adaptability, and creativity and innovation. And then let's go over to the essential skills with this. The difference here is we have reading text, which matches with, obviously, the reading. They decided it was more than just reading text, though. Reading could be involved in many ways. It'll be explained a little bit more when we get to the bottom of the essential skills. But writing matches completely the same. The next one is numeracy, which matches exactly as well. And then you have from computer use, they went to digital, right? Because computer use is more about having people use just the computer. That's back in the early 2000s. Nobody thought about smartphones and point of sale and all of those other things that are digitally based. Then essential skills also covered thinking skills, which included things like significant use of memory, critical thinking, and problem solving. The problem was that significant use of memory is very job specific. It can go to things like the point of sales, right? Because somebody's going to remember the price lookup number if they needed to. The difference being here that people couldn't identify between critical thinking and problem solving heavily. That was a big problem. So they just decided, why don't we just conglomerate them into problem solving? Because it makes much more sense. Other things are embedded. And from oral communications, they decided to make it about communications because oral communication is very specific. And we're talking about, let's go with writing. People can use writing in communications. Is it more writing or is it more communications? There's other ways to communicate, including for the deaf literacy folks. Working with others, I've always thought that that was interesting. Nobody ever wants to use the word teamwork anymore, but working with others also meant working individually, which I always thought was funny. But instead they went to collaboration, right? Which makes much more sense because this is all a collaborative effort, everything we're doing here. And when we were doing the research for this, we saw how much collaboration actually is happening, even between the workers and their employment service counselors or their instructors in LBS, right? Another thing was they had continuous learning and essential skills. And this is where they started to go, well, isn't that more about adaptability? Isn't that more about, that can people learn and grow and be able to pivot, which we've all been able to prove in the last couple of years that apparently we can. So it's not just about taking courses. It was a little bit confusing. And then they completely took out document use, right? Because document use was the one that nobody knew how to just pull it apart from everything else. Because document use also includes reading, writing, numeracy, digital use. It can include almost everything on the left. The great thing was the creativity and innovation being added in and being recognized, how important that has become in, now in the last few years, especially, that's a big deal. So that is a skill that's been added. So the new skills for success are pretty exciting that way. Okay, Preeti, we're going on to the next. So the next thing we had to look at was how are they leveling them? Because currently the essential skills levels are on a 500-point scale that I'm going to talk about a little bit just in the next slide. But skill levels for skills for success were the ones they're trying to still get a point on this. What they're trying to do is that they will still probably use the 5-level scale when it comes to reading and numeracy and writing, because those skills make much more sense to keep in that mode. But what they looked at was some of these other ones like the creativity and adaptability and collaboration. Is there an entry level and an intermediate and an advanced level in this? So we would be dealing obviously more so with things that were at that entry level to the intermediate level within LBS. And certainly employment services is going to be dealing with all 3 levels. So we have to think about it in that. It's a little bit, what I find about this is that once they give us an actual how it all fits, we'll have a better idea. But I think that this will be easier for people to talk about, saying somebody's at an entry level instead of saying, oh, they're at an essential skills level 2. What does that mean to an employer? What does that mean to an employment service folks? So let's move on to the next slide. Okay, the essential skills. there is a 500-point scale with the essential skills, and there's 5 levels to the essential skills. Now, in a normal world where it wasn't literacy or adult literacy, I'm going to have you go back a bit there, Preeti. We don't want to get to that yet. It's just the fact that level 1 is 0 to 225 points of a 500-point scale. So almost half the points are covered in level 1. Level 1 is huge because it deals with somebody who has no skills to somebody who can move up into the next level. And we're going to explain what that means now. Okay, Preeti, yes, dealing with finding one piece of information is basically what an essential skills level 1 is about. So it means, like, if you're asked to find something within a written document or within a text, just asking one piece of information, right? And then with math, it means one type of computation. So you can see where the complexity can come from, right? Because you can have 2 plus 2, or you can have 325 plus 243 plus 576, and so on. So that's how level 1 can start to expand. Reading, it means finding one piece of information, right? Who is responsible for responding to the email? I'm just going to ask who, if everybody can mute their microphones.
Or just for now.
Okay. All right, Purity, if we can go on to the next one. Okay. And essential skills level 2 is 226 points to 275. It's only a 50-point range, but they're now dealing with finding multiple pieces of information or one piece of information with distractors. And what I mean by that is they could be finding something that is, you know, we ask them, what is the temperature that this happens at? But there could be other temperatures throughout the document they're looking through. So there's distractors. In math, it means using more than one computation, right? So it would be doing the money math that you would do as retail sales even, right? You would be adding them together, getting tax, making change. That would be a skills level 2. And then reading, this means finding more than one piece of information, right? On which day does a cleaner sanitize the boiler? With there being different days listed for different cleanings, that would be an example of a distractor. It could be list the number of items they must use within this process. That would be a level 2. Because when it's dealing with more than one piece of information, that's when you've just added in that little bit more complexity. Okay, we're on the next slide. Great. Essential skills level 3 is 276 to 325, another 50-point level, as will level 4 be. Level 5 is 125 points. So you can see level 1 is the biggest, level 5 is the next biggest, and 2, 3, and 4 are kind of conglomerated together, because this is how this works, is that they're dealing with finding multiple pieces of information. So we're building on what we've already learned and using them in some way, right? So it's just in math, this means making more than one computation to answer a problem, right? So adding together an invoice, we can go to the next. Yeah. Adding together an invoice with tax and then making change for the customer, right? So you're getting that, but you're making that next step to go with the change. You've taken that first step. Reading, this means finding multiple pieces of information to perhaps explain how something is done or to compare products. So interestingly enough, level 3 is it's the level that they've decided was the competency level you needed for employment. And that is what makes it the most important one for us to know. If somebody has levels 1 to 3, they are probably going to be able to go out and get a job and keep a job and learn on the job the rest of the things they need for the job specific skills. All right. So that's what we do. And that's how it is. So I'm done with my section. Before I pass this over to Matt, I'm just going to ask if there's any questions. Matt, it's yours.
Thank you very much, Jane. Thanks for that an expertly brief walkthrough of essential skills. Hello, everyone. It's a pleasure to be with you this morning. It was a lot of fun working on this project revealed a lot about job search and even just the world of work in general. The star of today's show are the profiles themselves, but we're going to tease that out just a little bit longer before you get to see them. And I'm just going to talk very briefly about why you might use these profiles in career development work, whether it's employment counseling or skills training or other aspects in the industry. Next slide, please, Preeti. So this seems to be very common advice in the world of career development. We're always telling job seekers to treat their job search like it's a job. I remember hearing this when I was volunteering at the Career Center in university 20-something years ago. And it's true, it's a cliche because it has an element of truth. And the good thing about these skill profiles that we've created, not yet, skill profiles that we've created is that now we have basically a profile of this job. If job searching is a job, we now have a profile of the job. You'll recall that essential skills profiles list example tasks that illustrate how each of the skills are generally performed by workers in that occupation. And now we can officially really live up to this expression and treat job search like a job, because now we know exactly what's involved. We have a breakdown of the skills. Next slide, please. This was the fun topic. As we all recognize that we live within many worlds, including a virtual world that's within a physical world. Some people think it's a physical world within a virtual world, but we'll leave that philosophical discussion for another time. But it is true that we are jumping between these worlds, and sometimes seamlessly, and many times throughout the day. And job search is no different to this, right? And it's similar to how jobs themselves have evolved, and so it wouldn't surprise us that job search evolves in the same way. And increasingly, the line is blurred between the two. In fact, it's probably so blurry now that we really had to stop to think about how job search has changed. We're so quick to just go with the flow and say, okay, yeah, Zoom interview, that's fine, I can do that. But stopping to think that this is actually remarkably different, and it involves some of the same tasks and some of the same skills, but some very different ones as well. And more companies will be recruiting in virtual space. Just an example: Samsung Electronics, a giant technology firm, created a platform called GatherTown with their own avatars, and job seekers log in with their own avatars that they can create themselves and talk to HR managers and other staff. And they use this as a week-long process in recruiting new graduates every year. The term the metaverse is very popular these days, or you hear it a lot now with Facebook changing their name to Meta. But beyond the hype of that, there are some real practical applications where there is digital and virtual spaces where people are interacting, and job seekers are going to have to get used to that. Imagine having to create your own avatar to participate in a job interview or in a career fair. I mean, normally you thought about you had to have some fashion sense and know how to dress, but now you need to know how to dress your avatar. So and I don't know if colors clash in the same way on screen as they do in real life. I mean, it's beyond me, but it's just an element of how things are changing. On to the next slide there, Preeti. And here's another illustration of how things are changing. You never had to worry about your cat before, and what I mean by this is I was scrolling through a subreddit on career advice, and a job seeker asked, they were quite anxious and quite worried. They had a job interview coming up. It was a Zoom interview, and they have a couple of cats that like to jump around the apartment. And she was worried about, what to do about the cat. And, there was a list of comments, well, Give the cats some catnip and calm them, calm them down, or keep them away from you. Well, one person said, well, bring a friend over and have them lock into a room. Another person said, well, let the employer see that you have cats. You're trying to reveal your personality. You never know, they might be a cat person. The point I'm trying to make here is that you never had to think about this before. You went to an interview, it was in person, you probably didn't bring your cat, and you didn't have to worry about what was crawling behind you when you're answering questions or asking the employer questions. But now you do. It's one of the hundreds of things that you now have to think about when you're on screen. There are other changes as well too. I mean, even just the cost structure of job search has changed. So traditionally, there was a sort of costs that were throughout, right? So maybe you had to buy an outfit or two outfits for interviews, and maybe you had to print off resumes on nice paper, and so those were some upfront costs. But mainly your costs were sort of apportioned throughout the job search: transportation costs to get to an interview, mailing resumes, before digital applications, so you could sort of manage your costs. Now with virtual job search, there's a lot more upfront costs. You have to make sure your laptop can run all of the applications. You need a webcam, you need a good headset, potentially. I don't know how much it costs to get someone to professionally design your avatar, but that might be another upfront cost. But then once you have these purchases, you can now make a lot more use of them than before. So your costs throughout the job search potentially or theoretically could be less. So you can apply for many more positions now. So again, it's just a different way of thinking about virtual job search versus traditional job search. I'm not going to delay anymore the reveal of the profiles that we created. So before one more short pause before I turn it over to Jane to walk us through the first batch. I'll go to Charlene to see if there's any questions.
Oh, we still seem to be questionless at this point. So I think after the profiles, we might see some. So we're good.
Over to you, Jane.
Thanks, Matt. I laugh every time he talks about the cat thing, because at first when he was going, I was going, what? Oh yeah, you really have to think about that. It was great. Now I have to say this, to do the profiles, we couldn't have done this without the help of a lot of employment service counselors, LBS practitioners, and certainly businesses. So we've had input from everybody on these, and we've used Jamboards and we've used surveys. We used a lot of stuff to come up with these. So there's been a lot of interviewing that was done to make sure these profiles covered as much as they can. They can't cover everything because it's got to be what's the most common, right? So here's the profiles that we came up with. There's the online job search and job boards, online job application, the resume and cover letter on online job applications and job boards, not the resume and cover letter that everybody does. This is what do you do in this case. And then a virtual job fair and a virtual job interview. Okay, so we're going to go with the next one here. The very first one we're going to go through is the online job search and job boards. Okay, and in this case, who doesn't use online job searches, right? We all use them. We have to find different jobs. We post them up there too ourselves. So, but instead of getting easier to navigate, it seems like these have become more complex and varied with all the platforms and the different job boards that are available out there. So now we can go to the next slide. Here's the profile. And the profile goes on a little bit just to, we follow the skills for success components, right? So here's the thing. I'm just going to point out that we will highlight with an asterisk on each one of these the most important skills for these jobs. Pretty well, all of them are going to have digital within that, but it's really about what is it that they really need to be able to focus on with their skills to do this. And in this case, for an online job search and a job board, it's reading at a higher level than most of us might have thought about before, because you have to read how to use the job board appropriately, read requirements of the jobs in the job ads and figure out how that matches with what you have, research job boards and listings, read between the lines. What is the employer really asking? That was something employers asked us to make sure we put in there. Quite interesting. Read and compare skills required. So it has to be this whole thing, right? Everyone, there's still other skills that are needed. There's obviously numeracy skills. They have to be able to understand those rating of job boards. What are the best ones to go on? Calculate the years of experience or education was heavily mentioned in almost everything that we were doing. So they aren't going to know how to let's just skip down to the digital part. One of the biggest things that we noticed was an individual isn't going to know how to set up a job alert. Even if they can't even log on, how can they do that if they can't even log on to a board, right? So they have to learn how to do some of these simple things. This is where LBS can really help support people. When we're looking at some of these skills, it's not what employment services has to teach people, because you've already got enough work that you have to do with helping people move them forward. So you can see some of the other things that you can support them with here, but LBS can start teaching people how to do simple internet searches, how to log into different accounts, how to create accounts. That's skills that we teach in digital literacy. So these are the kind of things where you can look at how can we work better together as LBS and ES and support all of our clients, right? Let's go on to the next slide, which takes us into the problem solving that's required, right? So problem solving, usually going to be at about a level 3, just because of the fact of the different things that they have to do. Even problem solving using frequently asked questions can sometimes, it's not going to match your question exactly. So you're going to have to problem solve through that. As you can see, communications isn't even going to be used in this profile, right? Online job search, not normal to use that. But collaboration, adaptability, and creativity and innovation do not have complexity levels. So it's more about what are the tasks involved with this, right? And we did want to put in within collaboration, this is really important, so LBS knows to teach some collaboration skills. Working with their employment service workers for the job search supports is an evidence of collaboration, which can also be explained to employers as well as an example of how they've collaborated. So it's a win-win situation. Adaptability, identifying comparable, transferable skills, right? Adapt to new online environments, ability to change formats with different job boards. These are the things that I see employment services being able to do, but also that literacy can start to build some of the bottom lines on, right? And I think that those are really important within this, because employers kept saying, don't tell me what you can do, show me what you have been able to do. So give me examples. Let me know about what you have done and how that has worked. So this is the biggest thing that we were looking at. All right, so let's move on to the next profile. And this is online job applications. No longer do you get to see a person by even dropping off a job application anymore, right? You have to make your first impression in the actual application itself. So first impressions are now about written word, which is not most people's strong suit, right? So, but if we look here, one of the most important skills, obviously, is writing when it comes to an online job application. It's not surprising. Obviously, also digital skills will be there, but let's just talk about this a little bit. With this, I had to learn something new. The ATS, that was new to me. I didn't know that there was an actual system to do this. I've heard about it, but old and not currently looking for jobs. So for those of you in employment services, I'm sure this is very familiar to you. For the LBS folks, it's a bit of a different process. Understand that these automated tracking systems make filling in applications and writing cover letters and resumes even more important. We know people don't even reach the recruiters if their resume isn't done to match the tracking system. Match and compare are just 2 of the skills taught within LBS programs though. So LBS can start to see where they can support learners, and also ES can see if a learner needs that skills to be built, they can bring in LBS supports to that, right? We can work conjointly with one person. It doesn't have to be that they have to be only in one program and not the other. LBS is more than, we can actually have people throughout the different LBS programs. because different people provide different skill supports, right? So I think what we have to do is I can give you a lot of stats about literacy and employment, but with the knowledge of what those are and even what they mean about literacy, it wouldn't help you to know how we can really support you in employment services. Literacy isn't about being able to just read and write. It means you develop all the basic skills needed for work, learning in life, the essential skills, the skills for success. So the next part of that, as you can see, is the digital piece, right? And once again, it's recognizing file attachment limits, because there's limits on these things. So is your file too big? Do you have to take out some graphics? Did you use a picture of yourself that was way too big in your resume? Got to pull those things out. You need to perhaps be able to change formats. These are things that we teach, once again, in LBS. So if you and ES are running into that need for a learner or a client, send them to LBS. And once again, once in LBS that they have these, we're not the ones that need to know how to be able to complete a video cover letter. That's not our skills in LBS. That's an employment service skill. So you can see how these profiles show us where LBS can work and ES can work and how we can collaborate together, right? And collaboration between EO agencies like ES and LBS will be beneficial to everyone, right? As like you can see on the collaboration, it's work with employment service workers, may need to work with LBS instructors, may work with individuals and previous employers even to obtain references. We know how many people have also burned bridges in the past. So you want to be careful about that. So let's go on to the next slide. And the end of this one, the adaptability and the creativity and innovation. Creativity was definitely highlighted by employers and showing adaptability. And once again, this was new to me. I'd never heard of this before I started to do the work on these. And it was behavior-based interviewing practices, which the ES folks were the ones that were filling me in on what that was all about. But that kind of practice needs both ES and LBS to work together with the client, right? LBS is the expert on skills and communication. ES is the expert on employment and employability skills. And these profiles really show how important it's to work together for client success. Let's face it, the service system managers, or SSMs, as many of us have heard about them, are going to impact employment services strongly. LBS is your external tie to showing how your collaborative efforts are making for better outcomes. So it does give you a route. We can actually, as LBS, when you work with us closely, can be a supporting person on the outside to show why an employment service should be working under this SSM. Because the SSM doesn't have that same kind of contact with us. So they need you. They need you to have that. And they need you to be the one that is the conduit between the two. Am I also doing resume and cover letters, or is that okay? I had to make sure. Sorry, folks. So resume and cover letters on an online application and job board. We know that you do this regularly, but that cover letter does have to change when it becomes in this, right? So the most important skills for this one are, once again, writing and digital, but problem solving as well. And we're going to get to that one. So let's talk about the reading. Let's just go back one, Reedy, sorry. I know I jump ahead when I talk. It sounds like I'm going on. Once again, they just need to be able to read the basics of what the job is about, but you can see the level is at a higher complexity than you would think. It's not just like finding one piece of information. They have to find a lot because you only have so much that you can cover in a resume and cover letter. People don't want a 5-page cover letter. They're stopping there, right? So we know that. And in numeracy, there's still the calculations. There's a lot of simple calculations, but I've had employers state numerous times within the research that we did that they want accuracy in the number of years, not a guess. They want to know if they've said 3 years of experience, show 3 years of experience. So people really need to know how to use their numbers. And that's where LBS, once again, if somebody can't understand that, LBS can support somebody. So let's go on to the next slide. So we're not surprised that writing is going to be important in this, and obviously digital, right? But there's some things like just even writing answers to pre-screening questions that we have to think about. And I think that's important for us to know in LBS, to watch what is needed, the skills that we need to provide for somebody to go into employment or to get the supports with an employment service counselor or advisor, right? So we look at these right to answer behavioral based questions. These are all higher level. The writing isn't at a very simple level. You have to be able to do this. And what we also found was employers wanted you to stand out, not surprising, because they get a lot. So they want you to change your resume and cover letter to meet them. And that's what is the hard thing. A lot of people use the same resume over and over again. And the employers are saying, no, we need you to change it. We also want to make sure there's not spelling and grammar errors in it. Once again, something LBS can teach. You don't have to be the, grammar police in ES. So we can help them with that. Just even being able to save a document into another format is a different thing that people don't always know how to do. And it's important to just make sure that you know how to create and reset passwords. There's a variety of different skills that people need digitally just to put up a resume and cover letter. Let's go to the next slide, Preeti. Good. Problem solving is also another important skill here, because we know, and I know we all know this, applications on sites don't always work. All you have to do is have the Ministry of Labor Training and Skills Development and have to try to use SP Connect or any of their management systems, and you know that this doesn't always work, right? So it doesn't work online, as we all know. I can think about last year, we put up a job ad for a summer student, and only probably about 5% of the ones we got in, and we got quite a few, had a cover letter even attached to it. People don't even think about following through and finding out all of these different things. They need to learn how to use unfamiliar platforms, which is, once again, a skill that has to be learned. Troubleshoot all those online issues, which goes on to the next set of the skills profiles, which Matt will be doing, because it's really a big issue to be able to sit down and troubleshoot through what happens with connectivity and all of the other problems that come with that. Communications is important. Collaboration, once again, we go with no complexity levels on these, and sometimes they're very similar with what they're doing. You're going to work once again with your employment service workers to develop cover letters, resumes, practice job interviewing, all of those kind of things that they have to do within this. Let's go to the next slide. Right, thank you. All right, so adaptability, ability to change your resume to reflect your job description. This is something we really pointed out. And creativity, once again, is highlighted by employers for any of their jobs. You need to stand out. Having the basic skills allows an individual to do this. Otherwise, the basics like writing can overtake the actual creativity and innovation the client can use. So if you want the client to have success, they need that basic skills. And I will always go back to the whole point of, if you don't put in a good foundation, the house is going to crumble. And that's what we're talking about here. So if you want to have success with your clients in employment services, they need the basic skills provided by LBS. And with that said, if there's any questions about these, I'm available, but nope, okay. And I'm going to pass it over to Matt to take it on to the virtual job fair.
Thank you very much, Jane. All right, I'll take you through the final two profiles that we developed. Jane did a really good job of sort of pointing out just the underlying skills in these profiles. Again, things that we don't always take the time to think about, just sort of what's involved in each of these activities. I'll remind everyone that these profiles, they're not an exhaustive list of tasks. They're thorough, and they do provide the most common tasks, but they're meant to be examples. Of course, there are other tasks involved in each of these profile areas, and also these ones are designed to build upon traditional job search as well. So virtual job fair. The four most important skills are reading, digital, problem solving, and communication. That doesn't minimize the importance of the other sets of skills, but those ones seem to be the most important. You know, for example, with reading, and here's you know, a major difference between traditional and virtual job search when it comes to a job fair, like a live or in-person career fair versus a virtual job fair, is access. So in a career fair, you might need instructions, you know, how to find the location, you know, driving instructions or you know, bus routes, etc. And here, you know, it's how to log on to the platform, how to create a profile. So there could be quite a bit of instructions in terms of access and participation in the job fair. And that's why it seems a little bit counterintuitive that reading would be so important in this one, because it is about communication, but it's about just getting to the virtual job fair itself and then interacting once you're there, especially if it's a platform. And employers are more and more often using platforms designed for events or specifically for job fair type events, rather than just you know, like an open Zoom screen with breakout rooms. Let's go to the next slide. Digital, of course, is going to be probably the most important. And again, it's about familiarization with platforms and the how much is transferable, right? So, you know, generally, you know, if you are able to navigate one job fair platform, you probably have a pretty good shot at being able to navigate most of them. But it does, you know, every platform has its own quirks and peculiarities, and so just becoming familiar with them and being able to navigate them is important, and really goes hand in hand with problem solving. I think Jane mentioned this too, but I really do want to stress how important problem solving or troubleshooting or you know, figuring things out is when it comes to digital technology. Things don't always work, and things don't always work together. You know, the big area of technology is interoperability, right? How different technology systems work together. You know, can I open up Word with a Word document in Google Docs, right? And interoperability is better these days, but certainly not perfect. And knowing how to, again, jump between platforms or different technologies or different applications is really important, or else you can't participate fully, and then in turn compete with other job seekers. Maybe I'll go to the next slide and mention one other thing when it comes to virtual job fairs. Thanks, Preeti. So here, talking about collaboration, adaptability, creativity, and again, these are I guess these are under theorized when it comes to just job search. You know, you don't typically talk about creativity and innovation, but yet it's there, right? It is there, and how you present yourself, your strategy, you know, which employers will you talk to, which people in the company when you're in a virtual space should you spend your time with, you know, is it worth going to the 5 or 10 minute presentation about the company itself before you go and talk to an HR manager, if that's an option, but also, you know, thinking about how you yourself may respond, knowing yourself and your personality. So in a live physical setting, some people get excited by the atmosphere, by the noise, you know, that sort of that, and you know, and it gives them energy. And some people find that, you know, nerve-wracking, and they slink away. And it might be different in a virtual setting. People may be more comfortable not being seen, but maybe having just a digital presence, and they might feel better about approaching an employer or talking to a staff person. So, you know, your various levels of being in a relaxed state versus a nervous state, you know, may change, and it's important to sort of think that through if you're the job seeker, if you're coaching someone on a job interview, and you'll find that sort of embedded in these tasks as well. There's that element to it about, you know, how you yourself are going to interact. All right, let's go to the final job profile, which is the job interview. All right, so I'll summarize the top 4, and I think it's similar, but not quite the same as a virtual career fair. The top 4 skills are reading, writing, which might be again a bit unusual, digital, and communication. So in terms of reading, again, it's about access, it's about logging in, it's about preparation. Sometimes there is a list of questions beforehand, or there could be some sort of test built in to an interview, either before or after the interview session. And that. Let's go to the next slide. Writing could be in terms of communication during the interview or afterwards, or sometimes before if there's pre-screening. I'll also mention that there might be a little bit of writing in terms of well, let me back up a sec. It's becoming, I wouldn't say it's becoming common, but there is a growing trend of video, almost like sending in a video instead of like a telephone screening, right? So an employer may give a list of 3 or 5 questions, and the job seeker records themselves answering those questions on a video and sending the video in, and then the company screens those videos before they determine who they're going to invite to a job interview, a live or in person or on Zoom type interview. And it basically forms the same kind of ideas as telephone screening sometimes does. So in this case, writing might have to do with developing a bit of a script for yourself, so that when you're on camera, you get to all the points that you want to say, still trying to be natural and casual, I suppose, but still having a sense of how you're going to answer the question. So writing is an underappreciated skill when it comes to the virtual job interview for some people. And of course, digital, again, similar to the virtual job fair, I think digital is the most important skill because that is the biggest change from a traditional job interview. I've never realized how competent you have to be about lighting these days. Something I haven't really mastered. You can see the reflection of the screen in my glasses and a little bit of the glow on the top of my head, and it's not a halo. It's because my lighting isn't situated properly in my room and the type of lighting I have. It's I've learned to not really worry about it. But in a job interview, every little bit of how you present yourself can matter, and there are people who dedicate their careers to lighting. There are professionals in lighting, and now a job seeker has to know a little bit about lighting in addition to all the other things you have to do digital technology wise. You can see the list of tasks here, and you'll be able to go through them more thoroughly when you get these job profiles. But camera angle, right? Again, something that you wouldn't ever think about. Normally in a one-to-one or in a face-to-face job interview, the chair is situated for you. You just have to come in and sit down, right? You just don't have to think about these background level details. And so it's better to plan ahead. Like, it takes a lot of planning ahead so that when you start the interview, everything digitally or technology-wise is in place. And I think we're on to the final slide in this section, Preeti. Yeah, problem solving. It's not starred, but it really, when you talk about digital technology, you have to really assume that problem solving goes with it, right? Because anything that you can work with technology, something can go wrong with technology, and then knowing how to manage those issues. But of course, in an interview, it really is still all about communication. But notice some of the differences between in-person communication and online communication. We're not having a conversation yet. Maybe when we get to the sort of the Q&A section, we will. But and so we don't have to worry about who talks when. But in an interview, you do, and there can be a delay. If your internet speed is a little bit less than maybe the employer's, there may be a slight delay, and it's figuring out when you talk. You don't want to talk over the person interviewing you. That's generally interrupting is considered rude. There is a more allowance for it, a more patience for it in a digital setting, but it's still, it throws you off. And so in knowing how to, sort of pause and signal that you're done, and then conversely, knowing when the speaker that you're listening to is done is important there. So these are just subtle parts of online communication, that we're becoming better at all the time. But it becomes really important in this sort of high stakes or higher stakes setting that job interviews have. So it'd be good to go over that and spend some time talking about that and preparing for that. That's all I wanted to point out in terms of these profiles. I'm going to jump into the next section, but before I go there, I'll just check in with Preeti or Charlene to see if there are any questions. All right. So see what I mean by interrupting? And it's no one's fault. It's just, it's something that is difficult to work with sometimes. So in this section, I can't tell everyone, and I wouldn't imagine to tell everyone how to use these profiles in your work. I'm going to point out a few things that occur to me of ways that you may choose to use them, but I'm hoping that we actually have a bit of a discussion, and if people have ideas or something pops into their head, jump into the chat and or raise your hand, and we can have a bit of a conversation. It's really important that we have these profiles developed, that we figure out how to use them. We didn't have a project to figure out how to use them. We just had a project to figure out what they were. So we now need everyone's collective intelligence here to figure out how to make use of these best. So I'll just quickly run through a couple of ways, and then maybe we can have some conversation. So I think these work really well as a checklist. I'm a big believer and user of checklists. I think they're very powerful. Checklists ensure that the essential tasks get done. Even if a step is very simple, it can still be forgotten, and checklists allow you not to forget those things. So like the camera angle, like I just talked about, it's there, it's embedded now in these profiles, so it becomes a step that you can follow. They help avoid distractions. I'm just going to keep going on checklist just for another minute. Preeti, thank you. They help avoid distractions by forcing you to do the tasks that are on the checklist. And you can expand the lists of tasks as you learn more about the type of jobs that a job seeker is going for. So you can use them and add to them in that sense. They save time. They can be written out. You can sort of walk through in terms of what you have done already and what you still need to do. And there's a consistency element to checklists, right? Even though you may become that job of job seeking, you may become quite expert at it, but there's still checklists. Using these profiles as a checklist remind you that it's important to be consistent and make sure you do all the steps each time. All right, let's go to the next one. So you can think about these profiles as a shortcut to learning objectives. They're almost a mini assessment in and of themselves. Not that we're testing everyone for their reading and writing skills or their digital technology skills as it comes to these tasks, although you certainly could, but that's not what we're suggesting. But it does sort of give you even as a self-assessment for the job seeker to say, oh yeah, this is something I'm comfortable with. This is something I think I will be good at. Or no, I didn't even realize this was part of my job as a job seeker. And I'd like to learn a little bit more about this or gain a little bit more comfort level with this task or this subtask. And so now you sort of use them as sort of checking off what you have or what you don't have, what you want to learn more. And now you have a set of learning objectives, right? Because they're written in that language where it's very easy. So you can figure out, okay, so now I know what skill I'm using. I know what task I need to work towards, and now I can figure out how to put those together so that I can accomplish or perform this task in my job search. And the final slide in this section. So the reversing the Tower of Babel. So the Tower of Babel, as you may be familiar with, is a story from the Bible. The short version. And I'm not a clergy, so take this with a bit of a grain of salt. Is the people wanted to build a tower to sort of rival God, and God didn't want this and made them have different languages, and so it was hard to work together to build a tower, and eventually that work had to stop. That's a very short version of the story. But with these profiles, and we do speak different languages. I mean, I think Jane alluded to this. In LBS, we have a set of terminology, and in employment services or career development, there's a set of terminology, and they're related. And in some ways, we're talking about the same things, but because we use slightly different words, different terminology, different languages in some sense, we have different incentives in our programs. It can be hard to collaborate. We have to get past superficial differences and figure out what sort of the common goals are. What these essential skills profiles allow us to do is to speak a common language, right? Because the goals are now well defined, and they give us a list of sort of what we can work on together. You do this, I'll do this, the job seeker does this, here's how we can work together. So by providing these profiles, by providing a common language, it actually potentially increases collaboration. An example of these, these new skills for success, they use a lot of what, educators or psychologists will call social emotional learning or social emotional skills. Again, that's not a very helpful set of terms for if trying to working with a client. But if we talk about, it in the sense of, yeah, one's character or how they learn, or adaptability. These are more familiar terms. And then when we break them down further into the set of tasks, okay, so yeah, so this is actually what that means. Here's what we're going to do with them. It can become very, very helpful in planning out, sort of a support for the job seeker, for the client. So those are just, a couple of, or a few of the ways that that I envision using these profiles, but there are many more, and those in the field will doubtlessly come up with other ways. And that's really what I think I would like to hear from today, if people have some thoughts. I know we have a bit of a wrap up still, but maybe I'll pause here to see if there are any ideas about using the skills profiles.
I feel like I should be saying Bueller, Bueller.
Or any questions at all?
Maybe if we can go out of the presentation so we can see if anybody has their hand up or anything. We were really looking at, when we did this, I think with the three of us, as we kind of came together and started talking about it, we were really interested in making sure that what we developed made sense for everybody, and what we developed really did give ES and LES the opportunity to say, here's where I can see this person is struggling, and here's what this means. This may be where they are or where they are not. So we're open to hearing what you think. I got a question. Do all EO providers have access to these profile checklists, or do we need to purchase an account? These are all going to be sent to you for free. We will be sending you all of this as well. It will live on our website at workforceplanningboard.com. So no need to purchase an account. There's no account needed. It's all there. So we've, thanks to Jane and Matthew, that all the research is done and brought together. And you'll be welcome to share them with your colleagues who didn't attend today. You can share this session with them as well. And even, I'm sure, if you wanted to have a little further discussion, someone contact me or Jane or Matthew. We'd be happy to just have it being on your staff meeting and just talk a little bit more about what this means. So I think I can say we're totally into that opportunity to talk more about them. Well, we don't have any questions. So Preeti, if you can put in the link to the assessment, we are asking everyone to follow the link in the chat and assess what you thought of today's professional development. There's some really some questions, but the other thing we're also looking for is, we were really excited that 52 people registered for today. 34 of you are still here. So obviously there's some appetite for some learning amongst EO and across the board, ES and LES. So we're very interested in, what else are you looking for? Like, what sort of information would you like to see something about? And we would like to try to put together maybe a couple more of these sessions to make sure that all of the ES and LBS front workers have that information they need. We know the SSM is coming at some point. No word on that, but let's make sure that everybody has the information they need. We also know that there are a lot of new staff out there who maybe have not been doing these conversations for 5, 10, 20, 30 years. So, they haven't been here for the process. So to give that background, we'd really like to be able to develop that capacity within EO, both ES and LBS. So please fill it out. If you don't get a chance to hit the link, we will send out the links to everything else. So it would greatly appreciated. Jane, Matthew, any parting thoughts?
My only thoughts is that the profiles are living documents. They're going to change with time, but don't take them as this is the only thing, right? This is, once again, this is just what is the collaborative ability to find out what employers, employment services, and LBS have been finding with their clients and their employees. So, and yes, somebody just asked if you're going to receive a PDF copy of this session. Yes, I think that's what we're going to. We said we were giving you'll get the PowerPoint session, plus Preeti has done all of this up. She has made it into a beautiful document, and which I'm not good at. Matt and her really worked at that, and Charlene, and I just went, that looks good. So that's available. It'll be on your website, right, Charlene?
Yes, everything will be available on our website. Anything else, Matthew?
No, I just, it's the job of supporting job seekers seems to be getting more difficult over the years, and so I hope it's a resource that provides a little bit of assistance, because it is hard, and if it can sort of demystify part of the new world of job search, then I'm hopeful that it is helpful, and it was just a great opportunity to work on this and to bring this resource to everyone.
So with that, we want to thank everyone for coming, and we hope you have a fantastic day. And please do fill in the survey. You'll get everything in the next 24 to 48 hours. So thank you very much, everyone. Preeti, do you want to stop the recording?